Can't your kids wait? Vanessa's children need to eat first. That was Dean's voice, my sister's husband, louder than necessary, standing behind the grill like he was commanding a stage. His tongs clinked against the metal tray as he scooped another helping of ribs onto his son's plate, not once looking at me. My son Aaron took half a step back. His paper plate was still empty. I didn't say anything. I just kept smiling like I always did, polite, quiet, pretending I hadn't heard him speak to my child like that, like we were standing in a soup line and needed permission to exist. The backyard buzzed around us, laughter, folding chairs scraping against the patio, kids chasing a dollar store beach ball. The smell of lighter fluid clung to the air, but inside all I felt was the weight of my silence pressing down on my ribs like wet sand. I'm Julia Herrera. I'm 46. I live in El Paso, Texas. I do bookkeeping from home, mostly for small businesses that don't realize how hard they're bleeding money until someone like me points it out. I used to have an office job, benefits, everything, but after the divorce and Aaron's asthma, life recalibrated. Now I live in the guest wing of what used to be my parents' house, or what was supposed to be shared between Vanessa and me, until she started acting like she was the landlord. I stood there that afternoon holding a bowl of coleslaw no one asked me to bring, watching my kids wait for food like guests at someone else's table. Don't worry, there's plenty, Vanessa called across the yard, all sugar. Just let the little ones go first. Her voice had that tone, the kind that makes you feel petty just for noticing how unfair something is. Her youngest, Ellie, was 12. My daughter, Mia, was 10. I heard Aaron's stomach growl. Go sit down, sweetheart, I told him. I'll fix you a plate. I can wait, he said. He was trying to be strong about it, standing straighter, eyes focused on the ground. That's the part that broke me a little. If you've ever stood next to your children and realized they've started shrinking themselves to fit the space other people allow, then maybe you understand why I didn't move right away. I just stood there holding that bowl of slaw like it anchored me to the ground. If this moment feels familiar, if someone once taught you to smile through being ignored, then maybe you're not alone. Maybe you've been where I stood. Hit that like button if you've ever watched your kids be overlooked. And subscribe if you know quiet mothers still carry loud truths. And tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how many of us were told to wait our turn. The tongs scraped again. Julia, Dean called over his shoulder. Could you grab more napkins from inside? The kids are being messy. He didn't mean his kids. I nodded. Not because I wanted to, just because I'd learned it was easier than explaining why I didn't want to. Inside the kitchen, the AC was loud. I opened the drawer where the napkins always were, even though this wasn't technically my house anymore. Not in the way that mattered. My mother's ceramic rooster was still on the windowsill, staring into the backyard. The kind of old thing no one throws away but no one really claims either. I heard laughter through the glass. Ellie had smeared barbecue sauce on Mia's shirt and was laughing. Mia wasn't. Vanessa didn't say a word. I walked back out with the napkins. I didn't say anything. Just handed them to Dean and kept walking until I reached the edge of the patio. Mia was standing by the lemonade cooler, arms folded. They got 2 servings, she said softly. I haven't even had one. I'll get you some, baby. She shook her head. Do they always think we're less? That sentence, that voice, that moment, I felt something inside me twist. Not break, exactly. Just shift. I crouched down to her level. No, I said quietly. They think they can treat us like we're less, but thinking it doesn't make it true. Mia looked down at her sandals. There was barbecue sauce on one of the straps. I'm not hungry anymore. I wiped it off with a napkin and kissed her forehead. You still need to eat. What's the point, she asked. They're just going to say we're rude. There it was, 10 years old, and she already understood how the game worked. Speak up and you're ungrateful. Stay quiet and you're invisible. I walked her to the far end of the lawn, away from the coolers and conversation, opened a folding chair and sat her down in the shade. Wait here, I said. I'm going to make you a plate, with everything. As I stood in line behind Vanessa's kids, she turned and smiled at me like we were sisters in a sitcom, all shiny teeth and curated charm. Did Mia get something already? She asked, voice light. Not yet. You should really tell her not to be so picky. Ellie eats anything. I didn't reply. I just looked at her, long enough that she finally turned back around. I filled Mia's plate carefully. Ribs, mac and cheese, One of those buttered rolls everyone grabs two of. Aaron was still waiting near the fence, watching the older boys play with a football. I caught his eye and nodded toward the plate. He didn't smile, but he stood up straighter. I handed the plate to Mia and sat beside her. She took a bite of the mac and cheese and looked around. Are we still staying here tonight? I hesitated. The breeze shifted. Someone opened a bag of chips. A toddler started crying near the swing set. Just for now, I said. She nodded and went back to eating. The sky was starting to turn orange. I could smell the neighbor's jasmine bush behind the fence. The kind of detail you don't notice unless you're really trying not to cry. I looked at my daughter, quiet, small, trying to make herself smaller, and I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep watching them eat first while my children waited for crumbs, and I couldn't keep pretending we belonged here, just because we were allowed to sit in the yard. You know, it's just easier if everything goes under Vanessa's name. That's what Uncle Ray said when I brought in the mail. The property tax envelope was already open, and his thumb was pressed against the corner of the page, pointing to something I hadn't seen yet. I dried my hands on the dish towel and took the paper. It felt thin, cheap, like the kind of paper that folds easily when someone wants it to. Only her name was listed. Not mine. Not even as a co-owner. I stood there in the middle of the kitchen, while the overhead fan made its slow, lazy circles. The refrigerator hummed. Someone's dog barked 2 houses over. Life just kept moving. I didn't. Did the county change their system? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Uncle Ray shrugged. Vanessa's handling all that stuff now. She said you were okay with it. I didn't remember saying that, but then again, I didn't remember saying no either. I folded the letter and tucked it back into the envelope. My name wasn't on the outside either. I'm Julia Herrera. I'm 46. I was married once, for 10 years. The kind of marriage that looks fine on paper until you start reading the footnotes. When it ended, I thought I was gaining freedom, but sometimes freedom feels a lot like floating. I used to work full-time at a small firm, balancing payrolls and filing business returns for people who thought the world owed them a refund. Then Aaron's asthma got worse. Emergency room visits. Nebulizers at 3 a.m. The school nurse on speed dial. I couldn't keep both. So I started freelancing, bookkeeping from home, part-time gigs, whatever paid fast. And when the apartment lease came up for renewal, I moved back here. The house I grew up in, the one Mom and Dad spent 40 years paying off. It was supposed to be shared. That was the word they used in the will, shared equally between our daughters. But Vanessa moved in 6 months before I did. She said it made sense. Her job was closer. The kids were already enrolled in the nearby school, and her husband didn't want to commute. I didn't argue. I just took the smaller room on the far side of the house and unpacked quietly. She changed the curtains 2 days later, said the old ones were too dark for her taste. I let that go too. It started small, the way being erased usually does. One less invitation, one less seat at the table, one fewer voice asking, "What do you think?" At first I thought I was imagining it, that it was just temporary, that maybe I was reading too much into the way Vanessa always said my house when guests came over. Then the Christmas cards started arriving, addressed only to the Lawsons. No mention of me or the kids. I thought maybe the mail carrier forgot. I thought maybe I was being sensitive. I thought maybe if I just stayed out of the way long enough, they'd remember I was still here. But they didn't. If you've ever stood quietly at the edge of your own family, wondering when you became invisible, you're not alone. And if you've ever found yourself rewriting memories just to survive the present, I want you to know something. It's not in your head. It's not weakness. It's the weathering. There's a quiet kind of betrayal that doesn't slam doors or scream through walls. It just forgets you exist until you believe it too. I poured myself some lukewarm coffee and sat at the edge of the kitchen stool, reading that tax letter again. The balance due, the parcel number, the name Vanessa R. Lawson. Lawson was her married name. I kept Herrera when I divorced. I said it was for Aaron and Mia, but honestly, it was for me. It was the only thing that still felt like mine. "You okay?" Uncle Ray asked, pulling open the fridge. "Yeah," I lied. He grabbed a soda and left the room without another word. The envelope stayed in my lap. That night, I checked the county records online. Just to be sure. just to prove to myself that this wasn't what it looked like. But there it was, black and white, clear as day. Owner of record, Vanessa R. Lawson. Occupants 4? I counted us. Me, Aaron, Mia, then them, Vanessa, Dean, Ellie, Jordan, 6 in total. But only one of us was listed. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My fingers felt cold, my chest tight. I remembered the day we buried my mother. The way Vanessa clung to the folded flag like it was a trophy. The way Dad used to say, "Both of you girls will always have a place here. Always." I believed him. Back then, I believed a lot of things. Aaron coughed from the hallway, and I snapped the laptop shut. I tucked the tax envelope into my drawer beneath the receipts and client invoices. I didn't sleep much that night, and when the sun came up, I didn't go into the kitchen. I stood in the hallway, listening to Dean talk about refinancing, Vanessa laughing about equity, Ellie asking if they could repaint the hallway pink. No one asked me. No one even noticed I was awake. That's when I knew. Not suspected. Not feared. I knew. They didn't see me anymore. They saw a guest. They saw a burden. They saw someone easy to forget, easy to step around, easy to erase. But I wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. Julia, could you grab some more ice from the garage? The champagne's not staying cold. Vanessa didn't even look at me when she said it. Her voice floated through the hallway like background music. Casual, commanding, practiced. I was halfway through putting away the groceries. My hands still smelled like onion skin in plastic bags. Dean was already pouring another glass for Uncle Ray, who laughed too loud and leaned back in Dad's old recliner like it had always belonged to him. The same recliner my father used to nap in after mowing the lawn. Now it held Dean's weight, his glass, and his voice. "They've really done a great job fixing the place up," he said. Vanessa smiled. It needed a woman's touch. I wiped my palms on my jeans and carried the bag of ice down the hallway. The light in the garage flickered like it always had. The old freezer rattled when I opened it. Half-empty meat trays, popsicles for Ellie and Jordan, a bag of frozen peas that probably hadn't moved since Mom died. I cleared space and set the ice on top. My throat felt dry. I closed the lid slowly, like it might shatter if I moved too fast. Back in the kitchen, the countertop sparkled with wine glasses. Vanessa had laid out a cheese board shaped like Texas. She always loved theatrics, the illusion of taste. "Don't let the kids near the marble tray," she warned. "It scratches easily." I didn't answer. Mia was helping Aaron finish his math worksheet at the far end of the table, 2 pencils between them, 1 broken eraser. Vanessa's daughter Ellie pranced through in her ballet flats, grabbed a cube of cheese and flopped onto the white couch without wiping her fingers. No one said a word. "You're too good, Julia," Uncle Ray called out. "You keep this place running like clockwork." Vanessa laughed. "She's got the touch for chores, that's for sure." She didn't mean it as a compliment. She never did. I carried the empty grocery bags out to the bin, then came back in and started chopping strawberries for the fruit salad. Not because anyone asked me to, but because there was always something that needed doing, and I'd learned that staying busy kept me from feeling the sting. "Vanessa, can we go in the living room?" Mia asked quietly. "Not with food, sweetie," Vanessa said. Sweet as honey. "We just had the rug cleaned." Aaron looked up from his worksheet. "But Ellie knows the rules," she cut in. "Don't worry about her." Aaron glanced at me. I gave him a tiny nod. It wasn't worth the fight. I stirred the fruit with a wooden spoon. The kitchen clock ticked louder than it needed to. The light through the blinds made thin slats across the tile. I thought about how many nights I'd mopped this floor barefoot, after everyone else had gone to bed. "It's really amazing," Uncle Ray said again, this time to Dean. "You two have really made it a home. And Vanessa, you've always been the responsible one." The words hit me sideways. I wasn't even surprised. I was the one who handled the utilities, coordinated repairs, called pest control when the attic started smelling like rot. But she was the one who got credit because she dressed the house in wine bottles and Instagram-worthy centerpieces. I carried the fruit bowl out to the deck and set it on the table. Ellie dipped her fingers in before I could grab a spoon. "Please use a spoon," I said gently. She rolled her eyes. "It's just fruit." Vanessa didn't say anything. Dean handed her another glass. "Try the rosé." She sipped, then laughed. It's floral, like spring in a bottle. Aaron reached for a piece of cantaloupe. Dean blocked him with the tongs. Let's wait till everyone's had a turn, bud. Bud. That word again. I felt my jaw tighten. Mia stood beside me. I could tell she was trying not to cry. She hated crowds, loud noise, being treated like a problem. I placed my hand on her shoulder and leaned down. Let's grab a plate and sit out front. She nodded without speaking. We sat on the porch steps, legs tucked to the side. The neighbors' wind chimes clinked somewhere down the street. The kind of evening that was supposed to feel peaceful. But peace doesn't happen when you're holding your breath. I hate it here, Mia whispered. I brushed her hair back behind her ear. I know. Are we ever going to have our own place? The question sat in my chest like a cinder block. One day, I said. I watched the porch light flicker on. It cast a warm glow across the step where our plates rested, barely touched. Behind us, the laughter swelled again. Another toast, another performance, another reminder that I was never really part of it, only the one who cleaned up after. I stood, took our plates, and walked back inside. In the kitchen, the champagne bottle was nearly empty. Vanessa stood at the sink, humming to herself, scraping brie rinds into the trash. She didn't see me at first. I moved quietly. Then I heard it. From the dining room. Her voice, low but clear. They're just passing through, she said. This house will be mine soon anyway. Julia, could you keep the washer noise down? The guests are sleeping. That's what Vanessa said through the door last night. Her tone wasn't angry, just dismissive, like I was a tenant making too much sound in a building she owned. I looked at the clock. It was 9:47 p.m. I wasn't even running a full cycle, just rinsing Mia's school uniform for tomorrow. The washer rattled once, like it was apologizing too. Our room used to be the laundry room. Now it's where the three of us sleep. One twin bed for me, a mattress on the floor for Aaron and Mia. The walls are thin enough that I can hear Vanessa's TV through the vent. Laughter from her husband, the hum of their ceiling fan, the clink of glasses. The air smells like detergent no matter how much I try to air it out. When the dryer runs, the heat turns the room into a sauna. But I tell the kids it's cozy. Sometimes I even mean it. Mia was coloring on the little fold-out table we found at a yard sale. Her crayons were worn to stubs. Aaron was lying on his back, reading a library book with a flashlight. Mom, Mia asked quietly, why don't we use the guest room anymore? I pretended to be busy folding laundry. Because Aunt Vanessa's kids sleep there now, remember? But they have their own rooms upstairs. They're just visiting, honey. Mia frowned. They've been visiting for 2 years. I didn't answer. When we first moved back in, that guest room was ours. It had sunlight in the mornings, soft carpet under bare feet, and a view of the backyard my father planted himself. Vanessa's kids had wanted to play hotel one weekend, and I'd said yes. They'll stay for a few days, Vanessa promised. You can move back after. That was 2 birthdays ago. Now their posters are still on the wall. Their toys fill the closet. My old boxes, photos, tax files, Mom's apron sit stacked in the hallway. Aaron turned a page. The flashlight beam trembled. It's okay, Mom, he said. We don't need a big room. I smiled, though my throat tightened. I know, sweetheart. He went back to reading. I kept folding. Shirt, towel, jeans, repeat. Each crease felt like muscle memory from a life I didn't remember choosing. Vanessa's laughter carried down the hallway again. High, glassy, careless. I could almost hear the words between the tones. Comfortable people talking about things that didn't include me. Sometimes I imagined what it would be like if my parents could see all this. Dad with his steady hands. Mom with her quiet, fierce sense of fairness. I used to believe she'd never let anyone take advantage of me, but she was gone, and fairness went with her. Mom, Mia said again. Are we poor? Her voice cracked on the last word. The room felt smaller suddenly. The hum of the dryer filled the silence between us. I set the laundry down and looked at her. Why do you ask that? Because Aunt Vanessa said we should be thankful we get to live here for free. I froze. When did she say that? Yesterday. She was on the phone. She didn't know I was listening. I knelt beside her. We're not poor, baby. We're rebuilding. She tilted her head. What's that mean? It means we're strong enough to start over, even when it's hard. Her eyes shimmered. but she nodded like she understood. Kids always understand more than we think. She went back to coloring. I sat on the edge of the bed and folded a towel that didn't need folding. My hands moved just to stay busy. My chest felt heavy. It hit me then, the kind of tired that doesn't live in the body but in the heart. I thought about the years I spent paying bills on time, showing up to work, being dependable. I thought about how easily one bad marriage and one illness could shrink your whole world down to a laundry room. The hum of the dryer slowed, then clicked off. Silence. I breathed out and leaned against the cool wall. My father used to keep his old tool chest right here. I remembered the smell of sawdust and motor oil. He'd fix things himself because he didn't trust repairmen. People will charge you to forget what you already know, he used to say. I missed that kind of wisdom, the kind that came without a price tag. I started tidying the lower cabinet, trying to make space for Mia's school shoes. Behind a box of detergent and a broken hanger, my fingers brushed something flat and papery. I pulled it out. It was a small stack of yellowed envelopes, held together by a rubber band brittle with age. My father's handwriting slanted across the top one. Property records / Herrera estate. I sat down slowly. The paper felt warm from the dryer's leftover heat. I turned the first envelope over, sealed, stamped, postmarked from the year he died. The air shifted in the room. I glanced at the door, half expecting Vanessa to appear and snatch it away. But no one came. Only the sound of Aaron's soft breathing and the scratch of Mia's crayon filled the space. I loosened the rubber band and slid one letter free. Inside were copies of documents, legal, typed, with my father's name and a lawyer's signature. Some pages had my name too. My pulse quickened. I didn't understand every word, but I knew enough. They were property papers, deeds, proof of ownership, notes about how the estate was to be divided equally between heirs. He had kept everything, every receipt, every clause, every signature, and someone had hidden it. I stared at the papers until my vision blurred. My father had trusted the system, and the system had quietly folded his promises into someone else's hands. I slipped the letters back into their envelopes and pressed them to my chest. Mia looked up. "What's that?" "Just something Grandpa left," I said softly. "Can I see?" "Not yet." Her crayon snapped in half. The sound startled both of us. She smiled faintly like she knew something was about to change. I slid the envelopes under my pillow. The weight of them felt electric, small but enough to tip the balance of a house built on someone else's story. When the hallway light flickered again, I didn't flinch. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a guest in my own home. I felt awake. I looked through everything, my cousin Lily said. "If there was a copy of your dad's will, it's not in Mom's files." I held the phone tighter against my ear. My fingers were still damp from washing the dishes. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Positive," she said. "But Julia, you remember Vanessa had power of attorney near the end, right?" I stared at the calendar on the fridge. I hadn't marked a single date that year. Everything felt like a blur of repetition. Bills, meals, silence. "She handled the hospice paperwork," I said quietly. "Exactly." I didn't respond. "You should check the county archive," Lily continued. "There's always something on record, even if it's just the filing." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Thanks." After we hung up, I stood at the sink for a long time. My hands were still wet. I dried them on the same towel Mia used to clean juice off the table that morning. The corners were fraying. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep. I took the letters from under my pillow and laid them out on the table, one by one, like pieces of a puzzle I'd been too scared to solve. My father's handwriting was exact. Even after all this time, I could hear his voice in the way he underlined things. To be split evenly. Both daughters, joint custodianship, and yet, nowhere in the pile was the will itself. No notarized copy, no stamped page, no final say. Just a trail of intentions. I sat back in the chair and let the quiet settle. If you've ever had to choose between protecting your peace or digging up pain, I understand why you stayed quiet, but sometimes silence costs more than truth. If you know what I mean, hit the like button. And if you've ever been the only one asking questions, subscribe. I want to hear your story. Tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how many of us are still out here searching for answers no one wanted us to find. The next morning, I dropped the kids at school and drove straight to the county office. I didn't eat. I didn't bring coffee. Just a folder of letters and the sick, low feeling in my stomach that something had been taken. The building was beige and square and smelled like old paper. Next, a woman called from behind the glass. I stepped up. "Hi, I'm looking for estate records. For my father." She handed me a form without making eye contact. "Fill this out. We'll call your number." I sat near the back and filled in every box. Name Richard Herrera, date of death, known associates, known heirs, known addresses. I wrote slowly, like each line could break open a memory I hadn't prepared for. 32 minutes later, my number was called. The clerk was young, early 20s, maybe with a red scrunchie on her wrist and a tired look in her eyes. "Reason for request?" she asked. "I'm trying to find a will," I said. "It was never given to me. I just want to know if one was filed." She nodded, typing. "Name again?" "Richard Herrera." Her nails clicked the keyboard. She paused. "There is a file." I leaned forward. She scrolled. "Looks like there was a will on record, filed about 2 months before his death." My breath caught. "Can I see it?" Her eyes narrowed. "It's been amended." "Amended?" She kept scrolling. "Yes. Refiled with a revised date, signed under a different attorney than the original one." I gripped the edge of the counter. "What attorney?" "David S. Lambert," she read. That name meant nothing to me. "Are copies available?" I asked. "We can request a certified copy," she said. "Might take a few business days. I'll pay for it now." She handed me a payment slip. I signed the receipt with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. Back in my car, I sat in the parking lot with the windows up. The air was stale, but I didn't crack the glass. Vanessa never mentioned a second will. Never mentioned a different lawyer. She just moved in, took over, and started treating me like I was borrowing space. Now I knew why. Someone had rewritten the story while I was still grieving, and they didn't bother telling me. I turned the key in the ignition and drove straight to Lily's. She lived in a 1-bedroom duplex with a leaky roof and a landlord who ignored her texts. She poured me tea and waited. "It was amended," I said. "Filed by someone named Lambert? I don't know him." Lily frowned. "That's not the lawyer your dad used for the trust stuff." "I remember. He had that old guy, Becker?" "Yeah. I called Becker's office this morning. He's retired." No one picked up. Lily bit her lip. "You think Vanessa?" "She had power of attorney." We sat in silence. "Want me to come with you when the papers arrive?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not yet." I didn't sleep that night either. I sat on the edge of the bed while Mia snored softly, and Aaron mumbled in his dreams. The stack of letters was back under my pillow. The dryer rattled once and went still. I didn't move. I just kept hearing that sentence over and over again. There was a will, but it's been marked as amended by a lawyer you didn't sign with. "I've never heard of David S. Lambert." I said the name out loud just to hear how it felt in my mouth. It didn't sound familiar. Not like Becker, my father's lawyer for over a decade. Not like the paralegal's name I used to see stamped on the corner of every financial document that came through our mailbox growing up. Lambert felt wrong. Off, like a name made up on the spot. I opened my laptop and typed it in. The search returned one blurry listing. Lambert and Associates, Family and Estate Law. The office was marked closed, permanently. No website, no reviews, just a disconnected number, and an address tucked behind a strip mall off I-20. The building had once been a tax prep place. I remembered it vaguely from when the kids were little. We used to stop at the dollar store next door for school supplies. I called the number anyway, just in case. The line rang once, then beeped. "We're sorry, this number is no longer in service." I sat back in my chair. If this was the man who amended my father's will, why did it feel like he'd vanished into the ground the moment the ink dried? I tried the Bar Association site. No results. I tried searching for David S. Lambert and estate fraud. Nothing useful. Just another lawyer-shaped ghost in a world where names meant everything. I emailed Lily, told her what I'd found, told her I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden in plain sight. She replied quickly. One line. "Start with the notary records. Every will needs one." So I pulled out the scanned copy of the amended will from the county clerk's email. I'd read it 4 times already, but this time I focused on the corner, the notary seal. The stamp was clean, but incomplete. It listed a name, Stephanie Cole. The signature underneath didn't match anything else I'd seen. I searched her next. Found an address. A P.O. box 2 counties over. That was it. The more I looked, the more things didn't line up. The dates were strange. My father's original will was supposedly replaced 5 weeks before he died, during the worst part of his decline. But I'd been with him almost every day during that time. There were no meetings, no documents, no visits from strange men in pressed suits. And yet, there it was, filed, stamped, accepted. I reached for the glass of water beside my laptop. My hand shook as I lifted it. How many other pieces had I missed? How many other rooms had they emptied while I was still inside them? I sat on the floor and pulled out the old folder again. Every record I'd saved, every scrap of handwriting. I lined them up and started comparing, line by line, signature by signature. My father's usual R curved like a loop. In the new will, it snapped sharp at the top, a small thing. But my gut knew what my eyes hadn't dared say yet. This wasn't his hand. I remembered the way his fingers trembled those last few months. He couldn't even sign a get well card for Aaron without my help. He didn't sign this. I picked up the envelope with the amended will and stared at it. The paper was thick, unblemished, too clean for what it claimed to hold. The door opened hard behind me. Aaron stood there, his cheeks red and wet. "Hey," I said, rising fast. "What happened?" He dropped his backpack. "Aunt Vanessa told Ellie I wasn't really family." I blinked. "What?" "She said I was just a visitor, that we're not real Herreras anymore since Dad left." His voice cracked on the word left. "Ellie told everyone I was just living here on charity." My heart twisted. I walked toward him, knelt down. "You listen to me," I said, keeping my voice low. "You are my son. You are a Herrera. This is your family. This is your home." "She said it's her house," he whispered. "She said it's always been hers." I closed my eyes. I'd spent the day unraveling timelines and signatures, and now I had my child crying in my arms because the people I lived with wanted to erase him too. I pulled him close, felt his tears on my neck. "She doesn't get to decide who you are," I said. "We do." He nodded, but his breath still hitched in his chest. I guided him to the couch and handed him the soft blanket we kept folded there. His fingers curled into it like it was the only solid thing left in the room. I sat beside him, but kept my eyes on the folder, the weight of what it held, the things it might prove, the things it already did. If they were willing to erase me from a signature, they'd do the same to him with a word, a glance, a whisper behind closed doors. But I wasn't going to let them. Not anymore. "Julia, could you not make it about you tonight? Just once?" That's what Vanessa said in the kitchen. After dinner, after clearing my kids' half-finished plates while everyone else laughed over dessert they didn't get offered, I didn't answer her. I didn't say anything when Ellie called me a clingy in front of the cousins. I didn't speak up when Dean talked over me 3 times in a row, or when Uncle Ray toasted Vanessa for holding the family together. I just smiled, held my breath through the clatter of forks and the way Aaron picked at his napkin instead of eating. When it was over, I took my purse, walked out the back door, and slid into the driver's seat. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard I couldn't feel my fingers. My chest felt full of glass. I locked the doors and sat in silence. No radio, no movement, just the sound of my own breathing and the quiet hum of the engine ticking cool. I thought about driving, just going, leaving the dishes, the bills, the signatures, the names I didn't recognize but somehow still owned parts of my life. I could go to Lily's. I could take the kids and vanish into some cheap rental with peeling linoleum and no memories pressed into the walls. I could disappear. But when I reached into the glove box for a tissue, something fluttered out. It was folded in quarters, crayon lines, a child's drawing. I opened it slowly. The paper was soft from being handled. A long table. 8 stick figures. 5 seated. 3 standing behind a pane of blue. A thick scribbled rectangle labeled glass. Mia had drawn it. She'd drawn them all sitting at the table. And us, me, her, and Aaron, separated. Watching, not speaking, just there. behind something no one else saw. I pressed the paper to my chest and closed my eyes. If you've ever felt like no one saw you until you disappeared, maybe it's time they saw the truth instead. Maybe it's time to stop being polite, to stop being grateful for scraps. Maybe you feel that too. If you do, like this, share it. Tell me where you're from. Let them know we're still here. I folded the drawing and slid it back in. My fingers were steadier when I reached for my phone. I typed slowly. Forensic handwriting analyst near El Paso. Estate document verification. I hit search. Then I hit call. It's not his. That's all the handwriting expert said. Calm, certain, no drama, just fact. She slid the copy of the amended will back across the table and pulled out 2 earlier documents I'd sent her. An old bank form and a durable power of attorney my dad signed before the hospice paperwork started. The slant is wrong. The spacing's tight here, but wide here. The loop in his H isn't there at all. I can put it in writing, but anyone who's trained could see it. I nodded once, afraid if I opened my mouth, something sharp might come out. There's a kind of quiet that only forms when something inside you shifts permanently. That was the quiet I carried with me as I stepped out of that dimly lit office and into the brightness of a world that suddenly looked foreign. The folder in my hand felt too light for the kind of truth it held, like the weight had gone straight into my chest instead. I thanked her, paid in cash, and left the office gripping the folder like it was a matchbook in a dry forest. I didn't wait. I didn't even take off my shoes when I got home. I dropped my bag at the threshold and walked straight into the garage like I was on instinct. Something in me was hunting now. Not for vengeance, not yet, but for certainty. I moved like I had somewhere to be. I dug through the garage bins, tax returns, land deeds, birth certificates. My parents weren't fancy, but they were organized. Every document had a home, every home had a label, and every label told the truth. I pulled out old file boxes, one after another, stacking them in crooked towers along the wall. I could smell the years on the paper, ink gone faint, edges curled, corners stiff from time. I laid them all out on the laundry room floor, cross-referencing signatures like I was solving a crime scene. And in a way I was. Each curve of a letter told me something. Each stroke carried a fingerprint I hadn't noticed before. I wasn't just looking for what was there. I was looking for what had been erased, adjusted, quietly overwritten. The puzzle was coming together. Slowly, quietly, deliberately. I found the original will. Dated, signed, notarized. The wording was plain, clear, even, split equally among children. The handwriting was unmistakable. Clean, left-leaning, just like his workshop notes. Just like the letters he used to leave in my lunchbox when I was a teenager and felt invisible in my own house. Then I pulled the updated one, the version Vanessa had so proudly waved in court. It looked the same at first. Same font, same tone. But the signature, it didn't hum the same way. The way the pen lifted at the lawn was hesitant. Off, my heart didn't race, but my fingers tightened around the edge of the page like they'd been waiting to grip something real. I didn't stop there. Utility bills, joint property disclosures, insurance forms. I spread them out like a quilt of truth, connecting the threads one by one. It was like watching a lie unravel itself in reverse. Every form said split. Every letter said equal. Every date circled back to a time before Vanessa decided the house was hers. Before the renovations. Before the firm she hired to advise on asset consolidation. Before the notary change and the lost hard drive. Before I was told to stay quiet for the sake of family unity. It was like walking backward through a storm and finding that the sky had been clear all along, only someone kept shaking the windows to make me believe it wasn't. I didn't sleep that night. I made copies. I logged names. I started a folder with 3 tabs: real, forged, missing. I kept my handwriting steady as I labeled each one. No shakiness, no hesitation. The way he taught me when I was 10 and worried I'd never get my letters right. Write like it matters, he used to say, even when no one's watching. Now someone was watching. Me. I cross-checked Vanessa's emails from when we were settling the estate. Her wording was vague, based on new developments, she'd said, in accordance with the revised document. Back then I thought I'd missed a family conversation. Now I saw it for what it was, a silent hand tugging the tablecloth before the dishes even hit the table. The word missing kept growing. Documents that should have been archived weren't. The records from the family accountant, gone. The voicemail from my uncle confirming the original will had been sent to him for safekeeping, deleted, or so he claimed, but he couldn't explain how I had a printed transcript of it from 2 years ago. I looked at the wall clock sometime around 2 a.m. It ticked like it always had. Nothing had changed except me. I was no longer asking if something was wrong. I was gathering evidence that it was. I printed out the handwriting analysis report and slipped it into a clear sleeve. I printed out Vanessa's email, too. Then I printed the photocopies of the 2 wills and laid them side by side. One was a document, the other was a decision, hers. I added another tab to the folder, timeline, because everything I realized had a beginning, not just of the lie, but of the choice to tell it. She hadn't done it in a rush. She'd prepared for it, positioned herself, preened her language, waited until the right people were tired enough, distracted enough, or too polite to push back. But she forgot one thing. Some of us were raised to notice the details, the missing comma, the swapped font, the loop in the H. I taped a note to the folder before I placed it back into the fireproof lockbox. It said, simply, "Truth isn't loud, it's precise." Then I sat in the hallway for a while. Not praying, not planning, just breathing. The truth doesn't care who believes it. It just waits. And I wasn't afraid of waiting. The word missing kept growing. The next morning, while everyone else was out, I went into the master bedroom. I told myself it was just to vacuum, just to straighten the sheets. But the drawer in Vanessa's vanity wasn't fully closed. I opened it. Nestled between a bottle of rose oil and her lipstick case was a ring box. Worn velvet, pale blue. My mother, the one she wore for 47 years. The one Vanessa said had slipped off in the hospital and was probably gone forever. I didn't touch it. I just stood there staring at it until my hands went numb. Then I shut the drawer, stepped back, and whispered out loud what I already knew. She'd stolen more than paper. Don't forget to thank Vanessa before you leave. She really does so much. Uncle Ray said it with a full plate in his lap, not even looking up from his meatloaf. Mia had cooked half the sides. Aaron had vacuumed the living room. I'd set the table and baked the cornbread, but Vanessa hosted, so Vanessa got the praise. I smiled. Of course. That was the night I stopped reacting. I didn't push back. I didn't correct them. I stopped defending my place and started observing it. From that moment on, I watched everything. I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it House Admin. Inside it, I created subfolders: proof, receipts, statements, recordings. I didn't need to argue. I needed evidence. Every time Vanessa made a snide comment over dinner, I wrote it down. Every time Dean referred to our house like I didn't exist, I screen captured the group chat. Every bank notification that came with only her name in the subject line, I saved it. I even bought a small audio recorder, not to catch fights. There weren't any. That would have been easier. No, I used it to record the silences, the gaps where they erased me by not mentioning me at all. People don't notice when you're quiet. It makes them careless. At the next dinner, I brought peach cobbler in a foil tray. Vanessa laughed and said, "A little rustic but cute." I said thank you and made a note of the date, time, and tone. That same week, I texted an old name I hadn't used in years, Doris Marsh, the notary who used to help my father notarize every financial document before his tremors made it too difficult. She was retired now, but her number still worked. "Julia?" she said. "Oh, it's been ages." I told her I was reviewing some old estate paperwork, that I had questions about the final will, that there was a signature with her name and seal on it, from a date I knew she hadn't been there. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Send me a picture." I did. An hour later, she called me back. "This isn't mine," she said. "The seal's wrong. They used a duplicate, but it's off-center. My stamp has a ridge from an old crack, and this signature, that's not how I sign." I held the phone tighter. "You didn't notarize this. I never met Vanessa, and I certainly didn't sign that will. Please tell me you didn't buy those cupcakes." That was the first thing Vanessa said when she saw the bakery box in my hands. Her voice had that sing-song judgment she used when she wanted her insult to sound like advice. "They're from Bartlett's," I said, smiling. "I figured we deserved something nice." She blinked, then turned toward the grill without responding. Dean was already pouring drinks. Ellie was setting paper plates on the folding table. The same table where, last year, Mia had been told to wait until the real guests had eaten. This year, I didn't ask permission. I brought a plate for Aaron and Mia first and set them down at the center bench. Nobody moved them. I wore a pressed button-down and slacks, not the usual jeans. I'd even straightened my hair. Subtle, but different enough that Vanessa noticed. "You're dressed up," she said at one point, walking past me with a tray of sausages. I nodded, figured it was a special occasion. She laughed, not sure what I meant. It wasn't until halfway through the afternoon that the mood shifted. Everyone was fed. The kids were off near the fence playing some game that involved kicking pine cones. Dean was telling a long story about refinancing. I sat near the cooler, sipping lemonade with my friend Karina, the +1 no one had dared question. She worked for an estate attorney and had eyes like steel behind soft lashes. Vanessa sat down across from us, balancing her wine glass in one hand and her phone in the other. "I still can't believe we've kept this house up so well," she said, "considering how old it is. Dad would have been proud." Karina smiled politely. "It's lovely." "I had the will reviewed recently," I said. I didn't look at her when I said it. I kept my eyes on the rim of my cup, my tone casual, like I was talking about the weather. Vanessa paused. "What?" "The will," I repeated. "Dad's. I had it reviewed, just to understand it better. It's interesting what people try to hide in legal filings." Karina shifted slightly beside me. "Not a threat, just presence." "I'm sorry, what are you talking about?" Vanessa laughed, but it came out tight. "There were inconsistencies," I said. "Some signatures didn't match. And apparently the notary on record? She never met you." Dean stopped talking mid-sentence. Uncle Ray glanced up from his seat. "I don't know what you're implying, Julia." "Nothing," I said. "Not yet." Vanessa's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the patio. "Can everyone come in for a minute? Julia has something she wants to say before we cut the cake." Vanessa's voice was light. Sweet. Too sweet. The kind of voice you use when you're pretending you didn't spend the whole morning sweating through wine-stained panic. I stood near the fireplace with a folder in my hands. The living room was full. Uncle Ray, Aunt Marlene, Lily, Dean, Ellie, Jordan, the cousins from Fort Worth, a few neighbors. It was supposed to be a birthday toast. Dean's turning 50, balloons, sliders, family. But I'd asked for 5 minutes before dessert. Just 5. Vanessa called it a little speech. She smiled like she didn't expect anything serious, like she still believed no one would dare ruin her party. I cleared my throat. No glass in my hand, just paper. "Thanks for giving me a few minutes. I know we're all here to celebrate Dean, and we will, but I wanted to share something important before we do." Dean chuckled. "You didn't have to bring a speech, Jules." I smiled. I didn't bring a speech. I opened the folder and pulled out the first page. I found some letters Dad wrote near the end. Some of them had never been opened. They talk about this house, what he wanted for it, what he expected us to do. The room quieted. I kept my eyes on the page. I also had the will reviewed, not just the version that was filed, but the original one Dad created before hospice, the one that disappeared. Aunt Marlene shifted on the couch. Turns out there was an amendment, a sudden one, dated a few weeks before he passed. But the signatures don't match. I looked up. They don't match because they weren't his. Vanessa stepped forward. "Julia, I'm not finished." I held up the forensic report. "This is from a certified handwriting expert. It confirms what I already knew. The amended version of the will, the one that removed my name from ownership, is forged." Dean made a small sound, like a cough, but it didn't go anywhere. I turned the page. I also spoke to Doris Marsh, the notary listed on the amended version. She confirmed she never met Vanessa. She never witnessed the signature. She never stamped the document. Vanessa folded her arms. "That woman is nearly 80. She's also sharp as ever. And her old seal doesn't match the one on the will, the one you used." The room felt dense, like the air had thickened between every face. "I also have Dad's original instructions," I said, holding up a different paper. "He asked for this house to be split between both daughters. 50-50. No amendments, no secrecy." Lily sat forward. "Wait, So the version we all saw was a lie, I said. Filed through a closed law office with a fake notary and a forged signature. Aunt Marlene covered her mouth. I know this is a lot, I said softly, but I want everyone here to know the truth. Because what's been done to me and to my children wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft. I looked at Vanessa then. Her lips were pressed tight, her face pale. Dean opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Lily leaned over and whispered something to her husband. He looked down at the floor. Dad trusted all of us to do the right thing, I said. And I've spent the past year being treated like a guest in a home he meant for me to have. I've been told to wait my turn. I've watched my children be humiliated, and I stayed quiet because I thought silence would keep the peace. I let that sit for a second. Nobody moved. But silence doesn't keep peace, it keeps lies in place. Vanessa shook her head slowly. You're twisting this. I nodded. I expected you to say that. That's why I brought proof. I handed Lily a folder, copies of everything. The deed, the side-by-side signatures, the letter from the notary, the expert's statement. She flipped through them, her eyebrows tight. Aunt Marlene started crying. Dean finally spoke. Julia, maybe we should talk about this later. No, I said. We talk about it now. I turned to the rest of the room. You've all watched me play housekeeper in a home that belonged to both of us. You've praised her for taking care of things while I scrubbed floors and raised my kids in a laundry room. No one denied it. You thought I stayed quiet because I was weak, but I stayed quiet because I was gathering everything I needed. I took a breath, the final breath, and I want you all to hear it from me before you hear it from a lawyer. Vanessa took a step forward. You're really doing this? Yes, I said, because I didn't have to scream. The truth was loud enough. She didn't blink. Dean looked at her, and for the first time, I saw it, the doubt in his face, the crack in their perfect front. Someone's fork clinked against a plate. I'll be moving back into the master bedroom next week, I said quietly. You'll find the locks changed. Then I smiled, a small, tired smile, and walked out. You really think you're entitled to the whole house now? That was the last thing Vanessa said to me in person. Not a question, not a plea, just that cold, flat tone she always used when she couldn't pretend anymore. I didn't answer her. I just handed the signed agreement to her lawyer and let silence finish the sentence for me. The house was ours now, legally, equally. My name was back on the deed, and Vanessa, with her wine glasses and her silk robes and her curated sadness, had 30 days to vacate. She didn't hug anyone on the way out, not even Dean. The moving truck pulled out just before sundown. I stood behind the screen door, watching it turn the corner like a chapter creaking shut. I didn't wave. Mia was the first to speak. Is it really just us now? Just us, I said. Aaron stood a little taller. He didn't say much, but his shoulders dropped in that quiet way I recognized, the slow exhale of someone who'd been bracing too long. That night, I made a full dinner. Not just enough, not a side dish, not leftovers. I roasted chicken with lemon, baked fresh rolls, set out cloth napkins, even lit the candle I'd been saving since last Mother's Day. I served the kids first. No one said a word about it. No one needed to. They ate like they belonged. Because they did. After the dishes were rinsed and stacked, I opened the hall closet and took out the old frame wrapped in a soft towel. The photo had been buried under winter coats and a broken umbrella, not forgotten, just hidden, waiting. It was my mother's favorite picture of herself, black and white, mid-laugh, hand resting on my dad's shoulder. The same photo Vanessa said didn't match the decor. I hung it right by the hallway light switch, where it used to be. I stood back and looked at her face, frozen mid-laughter, like she knew, like she'd seen this coming and waited for me to find my way through it. If you've ever waited your turn long enough, maybe it's time you sat at the table you helped build. And maybe the seat has always been there, just waiting for you to pull it out and sit down like you belong. We didn't celebrate that night. We just existed, freely, without eyes watching what we touched, or where we sat. I started repainting the master bedroom the next morning. Soft green, clean, the kind of color that feels like spring without trying too hard. Mia helped me tape the baseboards. Aaron carried boxes from the laundry room without being asked. No fuss, no reminders, Just a quiet rhythm like the house was finally learning how to breathe again. We didn't talk much that morning. Mia hummed something under her breath, a tune I didn't recognize but didn't want to interrupt. Aaron was focused, calm, the kind of focused I used to pray for when he was younger and all over the place. It felt like we were all moving in time with something gentle and unseen, not rushing, not fixing, just settling. The sun came in soft through the kitchen window. Dust danced in the air, caught in the light like it had nowhere else to be. I stood still and watched it for longer than I meant to. When I opened my old hope chest, the one that had been boxed up for years in the garage, I found a dress I'd forgotten I owned. Light blue, worn at the hem but still whole. I ran my hand over the fabric. It still smelled faintly of lavender and wood. A memory folded into cotton. I hung it in the closet, just because I could. It didn't match anything else in the room, but it didn't need to. That same afternoon, I unpacked my books one by one. No alphabetizing, no pressure. I stacked them in small, uneven towers across the living room floor. Some of them had notes in the margins from years ago, things I wrote when I thought I was still trying to make something of myself. One said, "Don't shrink just because they squint." I didn't remember writing it, but I liked that version of me. By the end of the week, the back bedroom was empty. I let the kids choose how they wanted to split it. They didn't fight, they each picked a side and promised not to touch the other's books. Mia laid a small blanket between their shelves like a border. Aaron stuck a sticky note on his drawer that said, "No socks here." That made me laugh. I didn't tell them how much I needed the sound of their small arguments. Not loud ones. Just enough to remind me that peace doesn't mean silence. It just means no one's being crushed under the weight of someone else's power. We made soup that night. Mia peeled the carrots, slowly, carefully. Aaron stirred the pot like it was a magic potion. He said we should name the recipe something dramatic. Mia suggested freedom stew. I almost choked on my smile. Peace is quieter than I expected. It doesn't come in applause or reward. It just shows up in the small details, the unlocked door, the filled cabinet, the second helping no one has to ask for. It's the sound of laughter that isn't forced, the absence of apologies that used to patch over bruises. I found myself rearranging the pantry without any real reason. The cereal boxes stood like little soldiers. The flour sat in a new glass jar I'd bought at a thrift store for $2. It was chipped on one side. I liked that about it. Some mornings I woke up before the sun and just sat on the edge of the bed. Not because I was worried, just because I could. The clock ticked like a lullaby. Outside, the world felt soft, forgiving even. I started writing again. Nothing polished, just thoughts, fragments. I scribbled them on receipts, napkins, the back of old envelopes. One line kept coming back. "I am not who they said I was." Mia asked if we could plant something in the backyard. Just a few herbs, maybe tomatoes. I said yes before she finished her sentence. She looked surprised. I think I did too. Aaron started drawing again. Little things. Birds. Trees. One day he handed me a sketch of the house. He'd drawn me on the porch, holding a mug. The caption said, "Mom's Fortress." I framed it. On Thursdays we went to the library, just the three of us. They had a children's hour, and sometimes I stayed behind and read while the kids made crafts. One of the librarians asked if I'd consider leading a story circle. I said I'd think about it. I did more than think. I showed up the next week with my favorite book from childhood, the one my grandfather used to read to me when the power went out. I read it aloud with a steady voice. No one clapped when I finished. But one little girl leaned against her mom and whispered, "I want to be brave like her." I started painting again. Just watercolors. Simple things. I didn't try to sell them. I didn't even hang them up. I kept them in a drawer like secrets. The act of painting felt like its own kind of prayer. Sometimes Julia called to check in. I never let it go to voicemail. She didn't ask for updates. She just said, "You good?" And I'd say, "Getting there." That was enough. The kitchen started to smell different. Not just food, but safety. Like things were allowed to rise and fall without punishment. I caught myself humming. I hadn't done that in years. At night, I'd walk the hallway just to look in on the kids. Their breathing was the softest sound I'd ever loved. I sat at the kitchen table that evening with a cup of tea, and the porch door cracked open. The wind brought in the faint smell of jasmine from next door. The same bush that used to bloom while I cried into a sink full of dishes. Mia walked into the kitchen holding her school binder. She stopped halfway and looked around like she was seeing something for the first time. Then she smiled and said, "Mom, we finally live here. Planting that here won't last through the frost." Mr. Hammond leaned over the fence, chewing the end of a toothpick like it was the final say. I pressed my hand deeper into the dirt and didn't look up. "It'll make it," he grunted, then stepped back. The sound of his sandals dragging over gravel faded by the time I patted down the last bit of soil. I'd picked the spot carefully, right where the walkway curves, just before the front porch steps. Morning sun would touch it first. I could see it from the kitchen window, and when it bloomed, everyone walking by would see it too. A rose bush, blush pink, the kind my mother used to point out in neighbors' yards, always saying the same thing, hardy, but not loud, my favorite kind. I hadn't planted anything in years. I watered it slow, watched the water disappear into the roots, then sat back on my heels and let the silence wrap around me. This yard had once felt like a place I passed through. Now, it felt like somewhere I stayed. I'm not angry anymore. I don't replay the insults or rewrite the past. I don't fantasize about slamming doors or delivering speeches. I don't need to. Because the truth, it stays. Even when the people who tried to twist it don't. I sat on the porch steps, dirt still under my fingernails. The wind caught a loose thread on my sleeve, and I watched it dance for a moment before tucking it back in. Inside, I heard Mia laughing. Real, belly-deep laughter. Aaron shouted something about a missing charger. I didn't move. I just listened. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself or demand recognition. It just exists, steady, yours. A week ago, I signed the final documents. The house is officially in my name. Half of it already in the children's trust. There's no ceremony for something like that. No cake, no applause, just a quiet notary and a heavy pen. The moment the ink dried, I felt it. Not relief, not joy. Just alignment. Like I'd returned something to where it belonged. There's power in not needing credit, in not explaining, in knowing you rebuilt something others thought they buried. Vanessa moved. I didn't ask where. Dean's car still passes by some weekends, but he doesn't stop. That's fine. His silence is easier than his excuses. I cleaned out the attic yesterday. Found old boxes marked with my handwriting, things I hadn't seen in over a decade. Letters from my mother, photos from college, even the hospital bands from when the kids were born. I sat on the floor tracing the edge of a postcard my mother sent me the year before she died. On the back in smudged ink, "You don't have to be loud to be strong. You just have to stay." She knew, long before I did. That night, I made tea and lit a single candle in the kitchen. The kids were upstairs, music soft behind their doors. I opened the back door, let the night air in. It smelled like cut grass and lilac. I walked the hall before bed, checked their doors like I used to when they were small. Not because I was worried, just to feel it. This is our house, and I no longer wait to be seen.